you went into the public eye at a very young age, and you talk about ADHD and strengths. What was it like being a model with the traits of ADHD but unknown?
I now say that I believe modelling saved me as much as it also did a lot of other things, and I, suffered a lot through my own, perfectionism. Now it makes a lot of sense, but it makes sense of why I did do it so extremely.
You still run at a pace now, right? You've got phenomenal businesswomen, you've got your podcast.
Because I've done a lot of understanding on neurodivergence, I really do see the importance of knowing the strengths and not the weaknesses. And I've naturally, obviously, like I'm sure you have, used your strengths unknowingly.
Here you are as a fully qualified and out there nutritional expert. You've looked at ADHD, you've studied it academically. Now you're kind of even super qualified now to talk about this. Well, it does place you in a different place.
Yeah.
As most people would say, Sarah, you're such an extrovert person. And I am, but I can be exhausted when I get home. And, she'll say that's because you're masking. And, that is something that's very typical of ADHD.
Sarah Ann, welcome.
Thank you.
We were toying with where to start a session, a time with you. And I'm going to say that 48 hours ago, you were assessed and diagnosed with ADHD. I'm pretty sure you're keen to know, where are you with that now? And how do you feel about that?
That's a good question. And if I'm an honest answer, I'm going to be honest and say I don't know.
Okay.
Are you overwhelmed?
I don't think I'm overwhelmed. I think I was more overwhelmed 3 weeks ago with you calling me and saying, I think you have ADHD.
I felt that as well, by the way. I
Yeah.
don't feel that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where it was interesting because if you feel that somebody really sees you and then is like, says it from a place of like love, where it felt like it came from, it felt like, oh, this is how I see myself. I see this in you too. But I had that moment when I was 23 with dyslexia. And so I've gone through a lot of processing and dedication of understanding that felt such a barrier for me. So then to be told about 12 years after that there's another neurodivergent trait. The odd thing is I've always very much connected with ADHD because I've always been manic, busy. I've had burnout, I've had all the traits. And it's interesting. I just released a podcast last week with somebody on ADHD. And so I was thinking, oh my gosh, even just a few weeks ago, I was listening to someone and talking to them about the ADHD. I do that as a job. So sometimes you never really, even if you see all the signs, you just think, well, at my age, that would have already been picked up. Very similar to my dyslexia. So I think somebody telling me and then going forward with it. The irony was my nephew's just been diagnosed with ADHD and my brother 2 months ago has just been diagnosed with ADHD. But no one in the family said, maybe you should get ADHD.
Yeah.
So it was just this really weird moment that I was going through where I was connecting to everything that everyone was saying, but you also don't want to go, well, I must have that, because there's also this boom at the moment. So I didn't want to just think, I'm going to fall into that. I've been so self-aware of not being that. So then having you go, well, I think you have it, was a real
You could have taken that, but you're right, it was coming from a place of observation, love, and connection. And I've got my own journey on that as well, right? So it was an empathetic point of view.
100%. But I think it was because I had so many people around me going through it. I didn't want to go, when you sometimes say to someone, oh, I'm suffering with this, and they go, oh, I am too. You feel kind of your limelight's taken from you. So I also was really conscious myself of not going through that journey because other people that I loved were really going through it. But then when this happened, I was like, well, I'm in it. What do I do now?
When you had the call, which of course I'd been through 24 hours later from you, which mine was yesterday, I want to know from you what your first thoughts were once you kind of almost got off the phone and you're alone and you're just processing that.
On Sunday?
Yeah.
Or before?
No, once you've actually been told by someone that you're not just ADHD, you massively conform to it.
Presumably you were on a video conference call, weren't you?
Yeah.
So the question then, so it's a great question. At that time,
it's the first time you're alone.
Yeah. What was the feeling within you then?
I think it's interesting. I felt seen, which is a big part. I felt that I understood myself. I mean, I want to say that I had grief, but I think I had grief before the call.
Uh-huh.
That's the interesting thing. I think I have been turning a blind eye to it. And so I think just going to that journey was more emotional. One of the interesting things that I find about this, and I find about anything that's neurodivergent, and this is not just ADHD, I think this is autism, I think this is dyslexia, maybe less so, is that women mask.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I knew from a very early age the importance of like social skills and acceptance, especially starting work at a very young age as well, being 16, going into an industry. I've had to learn very quickly, so I think I've masked a lot of things. And having that connection, especially with a woman who was doing it with me, and her telling me, it's a very known thing that women will mask along this, allows you just to kind of take the mark down. And she said something which was very true. As most people would say, Sarah, you're such an extrovert person. And I am, but I also very much I can be exhausted when I get home.
Mm-hmm.
And, she'll say that's because you're masking all day. And it's interesting because sometimes I'm in my head going like, why am I so exhausted? Like all the time, I don't understand. And yes, part of it's because I work at an insane pace, but I do what I love. So for me, it doesn't feel like work, but then I have this like extreme exhaustion. And, that is something that's very typical of ADHD. So kind of having these like conversations and feeling safe enough to like unmask,
Mm-hmm.
because I've spent 35 years masking it. So you have to feel emotionally safe to be able to truly speak, because very much through your life, you're kind of shamed into certain things. Not intentionally, but, it doesn't fit into society's like rigid rules and boxes and schools and all that type of thing. So you learn to disconnect very quickly, and you learn like what's acceptable and what's not. So it was really nice to feel that actually there's like no judgment there, and this is just who you are. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like an interesting process, but I also think as much as there is maybe a grieving period, I think I had that a lot with my first dyslexia. And I think this now, because I've done a lot of understanding on neurodivergence, I really do see the importance of knowing the strengths and not the weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And I've naturally, obviously, like I'm sure you have, used your strengths unknowingly, which also I kind of said to her at the end, that makes me feel more proud.
I parallel that because I'm 47. So the conversations I've had with Phil before you arrived today is that actually I may well have dealt with this very differently as a younger version of myself, but I've probably got maturity perspective, and I've pieced together a very messy puzzle to be at this stage of my life now to understand it. And I think something you could probably resonate with as well is it would have confused me and given me far more questions if I hadn't actually been diagnosed with ADHD. I mean, because just the same as you, I'm drawn to it. When I'm hearing that this person says I do that, that would have been very confusing.
Let's whiz back then. You went into the public eye at a very young age, didn't you? Successfully, very successfully. And you talk about ADHD and strengths. What was it like being a model with the traits of ADHD, but unknown as the traits of ADHD, and in the public eye? What now when you look back, and I guess you're looking back for almost in this depth for, you are a reflector. I can tell you're a reflector. What was it like looking back onto there then, do you think?
I think I'm definitely someone who processes and reflects. That's actually something that's really important for me. I actually reflected more earlier than that, because I now say that I believe modelling saved me as much as it also did a lot of other things. And I, suffered a lot through that, through my own, I guess, perfectionism and stress of the industry. Being in school, I just was always disconnected. My focus wasn't there. I had dyslexia, obviously had ADHD. I was always just told to go outside the class because I was speaking or because I was just disinterested. And I couldn't sit still. And so unless something really empowered me or excited me, I'd just disconnect. And so I felt quite useless. And so when I got into modelling at 16, it felt like a bit of a lifeline, because I could be on set and they would put some of my favourite music on and I'd just like come alive and just change. And I was around people all the time. Like for me, I was like inspired, you know, every day was different. And for some people that is really hard. But for me, that's where I thrived. It was like exciting. It was new. We'd be all over the place. And I guess for me, that was really exciting for me. And I always wanted to do more. My mum was very much like, you know, you've got to be careful until you're 18. But I had a hunger there. And I think she struggled to maintain that. And as soon as my 18th birthday hit, or just before, I had already moved to London and found a place to live in 4 days. And I think she kind of couldn't kind of keep up with the pace of it. So I think that was what was really interesting. And then obviously the pace for me just kept going, and I just kept going. And so not having the awareness of how I actually am quite impulsive and how I, you know, thrive in that, but at my expense of myself, you know, was something that I was very unaware of. So I think that is what I look back on now, just sitting here thinking about it.
And how does that at the expense of yourself manifest? How did...
Well, that's the thing, because you burnt out, didn't you?
Yeah.
So I mean, you didn't know how to say no to anything. You're on a relentless drive, thriving off the diversity and the energy.
Yeah.
Your body gave up on you ultimately, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. I had like such an extreme perfectionism about me, which I think I still have, but I've learned to manage it. And I do all of my work now on self-compassion. I mean, at the end of the consultation, she was like, we're now going to talk about self-compassion. And I was thinking, this is everything I'm dedicating my work to. It was ironic that I've obviously gone through so much and realized that these are all the missing pieces. But, you know, at 23, I had a complete burnout and I was hospitalized. And it's interesting because I look back now and, you know, I see the stress of like how thin I was and the pressure that I put on myself and how I had to have this extreme perfectionism. And all of it was because I wanted, I guess, to feel good enough and accepted and do the best that I could, especially as I didn't feel that I had that at school. You know, I felt that I was a bit of I don't want to say a lost soul. I worked really hard, but it was just seemed a lot harder for me than everyone else. Now it makes a lot of sense, but it makes sense of why I did do it so extremely, especially in those first few years, because it felt that I could actually do this. And so when I ran at it, and I didn't want to let any opportunity go.
But I want to link that into nutrition, because I'm wanting to go to where you are now. This version of Sarah Ann is all about nutrition, isn't it? Talk to me briefly about this version of you, and then we'll try and correlate that to the ADHD version of you as well, which I think will be exciting. So go on, what's this version of you all about?
What I'm doing? So I guess it's been a bit of I think my work's been like a personal public journey, if I'm honest. You know, I found something that I was good at very young, luckily, which I'm very grateful for, which was modelling. But then everything crashed and burned when I didn't look after myself. And I guess I didn't have very high self-worth. You know, my self-worth was very much built on the extension of other people accepting me for what I look like, which is, when your financial worth relies on that as well, is a very worrying place. And so for me, the body breakdown was the intense pressure cooker when it had enough. And I kind of say it's very similar. People might have a midlife crisis. I think I had it at 23. You know, I had kind of an amazing job and an amazing career, but I completely hated myself. And so that place of, I wouldn't say it's self-destruction, but the intense pressure that I put on myself to be the very best, which you can't be all the time, there was no emotional landscape or understanding of who I was. And so that took me on a massive journey to understand who I was. But I didn't know I was not neurotypical in any way. So my first kind of conjunction was going back to school, which felt terrifying for me, knowing that I was awful at school. But I wanted to understand myself. And so biochemistry and nutritional science was an important place to start. But I didn't understand anything again. I was just like zoning out of class. And so I went to drop out, and that's when my professor first told me that I was dyslexic. And it was that moment where, like, similar to when you called me, it was this really kind of, well, I know that I've struggled, but I've never had the self-confidence to like take that step. So somebody offering that was really emotional for me. And so I went on, you know, a very long journey in university to understand, and dedicated my entire dissertation to ADHD, ironically, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and autism, and understanding like how nutrition can support neurodivergent brains, with an exceptional lens on dyslexia, because I was dyslexic. So I was like, I want to figure myself out. And then that led me to starting a mental health charity and not-for-profit, which wanted to be the first independent organization in the fashion industry to help young minds to not feel so lost that I did. Because for me, I didn't feel like I had any support. And this was in a time when mental health wasn't really available to many people, especially in a cool, preventable way. It was more that you had this, you have to see a therapist, and that was kind of the end of the road. And I wanted to make that different. And interestingly, now I understand that giving back aided the growth of my own self-worth. You know, that was a really important mechanism that I didn't understand, but it was just this compulsion that I had. And then from that, I had my clinic and started seeing patients for nutrition and working very much in that field, and then started the show. And for me, I guess everything of what I've done is more understanding myself, but also an extension to offering that out. The Be Well was just in the fashion industry, and I had this urge where I was like, okay, well that part feels like we're kind of helping, but what about everyone else in the UK? What about everyone else in Europe? How can we get this information out there? And that was the urge for me to start the show. And, you know, that spans across all different types of health, because I don't believe that we should look at them in silos, which is, I guess, my journey, right? It started nutrition, it went to mental health, it went to emotional health. And now it's kind of the foundational moment that I work on now is self-compassion. And that runs through everything that I do. And I believe that if I'd started there, which is the very part of my beginning of my journey, if I had more compassion and understanding for myself, it may have been a bit of a different journey. I guess I'm hyper grateful that it wasn't, because I wouldn't do the work that I'm doing now with purpose. But that's something that is kind of very integral, which was the irony on Sunday.
That's what I was thinking.
We're now going to talk about self-compassion. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've been researching this for 2 years intensely.
How did you do?
It's amazing.
Really good.
It's amazing how much, it's almost like you manifested the fact that, you know, you studied ADHD from a nutrition point of view, and then this whole self-compassion, which Alex Partridge with the ADHD Chatter podcast has this massive community. And I said, what's the one thing that needs to change? And it wasn't legislation, it was self-compassion. It's like the people are just so hard on themselves.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, it could take us 6, 7, 8, 10 times longer to do something, and therefore you are exhausted in the day, and then that actually plays on your mind. This is fascinating. What about the nutrition? Because
that's
you studied it, and I'm now clearly super interested in this, because it feels like you're already prepped. You know, you could argue from a nutritionist point of view that you're now going, I need to reevaluate my diet, look at what I'm going to eat. But you've already been studying that. So what do we need to be eating now from dinner onwards, right?
I guess something that's so important for anyone that, I mean, it's ADHD or not, that struggles with concentration, is sugar is such a big thing. And I think, you know, I don't want to say becoming obsessive, but if you're unaware and you're not, you know, as intuitive with your bodies and how you're feeling, which can work very much with a distracted mind, is wearing a glucose monitor, even just for 4 or 5 days, which maybe you'll be aware of being a diabetic, that can start showing you when you have big spikes. And so trying to keep up your blood glucose doesn't need to be level, because it shouldn't be. It will have peaks and troughs, but to not have such kind of huge peaks and troughs, they're called big dippers, is really important. So looking at, you know, a really good carbohydrate intake that's not refined, that's not processed, having lots of protein, starting your day with protein is really, really important. Trying to make sure that you're getting as many fruits and vegetables. It sounds so kind of normalized, but 2/3 of our shopping basket sadly are ultra processed foods. And so all of this is kind of adding to the problem of, I mean, we're seeing kind of two sectors here, obesity and mental health crisis. It's not, there's a complete parallel in both of them.
It's interesting because I think you know, listening to that, you could say, well, that's a neurotypical good diet. The difficulty we find with the neuro spicy diet is that sugar has provided the dopamine rush in the past. The junk food has given me that feel good factor in the past. Exactly. And what we're in is, we're not starting from a level playing field here with somebody who 48 hours ago, not you, but 48 hours ago got their diagnosis. We're behind that curve.
Yeah.
Where we've got an inability to plan a good diet because of lack of planning capability, because of neurodiversity, inability to shop appropriate, may not have the income to shop appropriately at first. So there's a whole social construct, and then there's the availability of cheap fast food,
Yeah.
which fills you up at the moment but doesn't sustain that. So you go back and have more cheap fast food.
Yeah.
And that ADHD, if you will, that ADHD lifestyle does lead to obesity.
And it's boredom and boredom.
Absolutely.
Bored. So someone I know very closely who has ADHD is like, why am I always snacking?
Yeah.
You know, and it's interesting. I was like, I think it's because you're bored and you're trying to find something, right, to like please yourself with. It's like, it's a very interesting kind of, food is a massive coping mechanism.
It is. So here you are as a fully qualified and out there nutritional expert. Now you've looked at ADHD, you've studied it academically. Now you're kind of even super qualified now to talk about this. Well, it does place you in a different place.
Yeah, lived experience married with.
It does. And what do you intend doing? And this is a challenging question for the ADHD community you're now part of, because we're working extensively on
pressure.
We're working on ADHD below the neck.
Yeah.
So everyone talks about the prefrontal cortex and what's going on in here and the dopamine, but actually what's going to take 13 years off people's life is not what's going on in here, it's what's going on below the neck, the heart disease, the strokes, the diabetes, all those kind of things. And that's where someone like you will be able to help the community make a big, big difference. And of course, you are coming in with lived experience now, which is another bonus point, isn't it? It gives you the bonus ball. And the whole ADHD below the neck is really, really important. So when I was introduced to the concept of you by John, I just thought, wow, that's really exciting. But genuinely, because this isn't a fad for you, is it? This isn't a flash in the pan, an opportunity to make a quick buck. This is something that's in your core. When we spoke on the phone a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to probe that with you to see where you stood. And you stand in the right place, don't you, to make a difference with this?
Yeah, I think I haven't thought about how I use it with ADHD yet because I'm still processing, but I guess all the work that I've done is someone who has ADHD or any neurodivergence will connect to. You know, the things that I talk about, like I've never come out with a strict diet. I've never championed rigid routines. These are the things that all comes from a place of self-compassion and understanding yourself first. Because if you don't have that ingredient, you are not going to be able to do these other things. And, you know, when I explained a diet, I can explain it very easily in that way. But if it was that easy, we wouldn't be having a mental health crisis and we wouldn't be having an obesity crisis. So it isn't easy. So there's a massive disconnect. Whether you're neurotypical or not, like it's a huge emotional connectional mechanism that is overrun by pharma companies and, you know, people that don't want to help your health. And so the most important thing is like, before we even think about that stuff, and this is how I talk to my patients and myself, is to kind of have that self-compassion with yourself and talk to yourself as you would a friend. So if you're approaching your diet and you're feeling like really overwhelmed, it's like, how would I speak to somebody that I really love that's struggling right now? Because telling somebody to eat oily fish 3 times a week, kind of helpful, really not going to be helpful for a behavioral change. You've got to come from a place of like understanding and compassion as you would a friend. And I can guarantee that anyone listening to this or connection will always want to do the best they can for someone they love. But we don't do it for ourselves because we don't put ourselves in that same level playing field. And we see all of the things that are wrong. And I think that's why I was saying that I started seeing the positives and the things that I was like, I'm really proud of myself for. I did not do that at 23 because I hadn't done any of the work in self-compassion. You know, for me, it was like, I'm going to have this diet and I'm going to live this life and I'm going to be really, really healthy. And then I came to a block again and I was like, I'm still not there.
But it wasn't healthy, was it?
No, but it was when I graduated. I mean, actually, ironically, it was healthy at one point because I was living this model diet, but the stress and the pressure
so the overall
was reducing any nutrient absorption.
Absolutely. So yes, it might be healthy from a nutrient perspective, but from a holistic whole body perspective, far from it. I was once advised by a psychologist, don't start a diet when you're under a lot of stress because going
don't
on a
start
diet.
Diet full stop.
Well,
Take off the T and it says die.
I've never heard that before. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So in the last moments of our time together, which I think I'm hoping will lead to more time together on this agenda, we've talked about protein, starting the day protein, the right carbohydrates. Their lifestyle changes, not diets, aren't they? That's where you're going
I
with
think
that.
it's really important.
And
water.
And hydration.
It's really important. But cues, having things out on cues.
Yes.
So like I say this, like, oh, have protein. If you don't have protein, like good healthy yogurts in your fridge and eggs, and you actually just have cereals everywhere, what are you going to pick?
Yeah.
We're going to pick a cereal because it's quick.
And that's the ADHD piece again. If you don't shop appropriately, you're not going to eat appropriately.
Yeah.
And that's where I think there's a piece of work we can do. So there's a young mum watching us now. You've got one last chance, and that literally is what you've got. You've got one last chance. We talk about self-compassion. I'm not going to put you on the nutrition piece, but I'm going to put you on the self-compassion piece. How can we bring a teenage girl into being a 20-year-old girl and understanding self-compassion? Because you've been on the wrong side of that.
Mm-hmm.
What was your biggest life lesson that will carry over to someone else, do you think?
I think my biggest life lesson is, it's hard because there's a couple, but I would say to take the pressure off perfectionism.
Yeah.
To talk to yourself, which is hard, but you have to talk to yourself as you would somebody you love.
Okay, I get that. Yeah.
Because I think it's very hard for one to notice what they're saying to themselves. I had no idea how badly I was speaking to myself. I had no idea the pressures I just thought it was expected. You know, for me, I felt it was much more exhausting for me to do things than other people. So I just had to keep working harder and harder and harder and harder.
Accept it, change it, move on.
I think just knowing that you have amazing strengths and weaknesses are just the philosophy of life, and knowing more what your strengths are than your weaknesses are. Because what I did for a very long time was try and shadow all of my weaknesses and like not show them because I was scared and had no idea of anything I was good at. So all of my energy was into hiding things that I was shameful of, as opposed to being like, actually, these are all the things that I'm really good with. What can I do here? Like, I didn't know what that was. And so I'd say to like anyone, especially a teenager, focus on the things that, 1, bring you happiness, 2, bring you joy, and 3, like get your attention. Like, focus on these things. Know that we all have these parts of us that we struggle with, and that's okay. And that makes you part of the you. That's what makes you human. But always focus on the things that bring you joy and the strengths. I think those weaknesses, if you can share them proudly and vulnerably, 1, you've got amazing, incredible self-awareness, and 2, people will relate to you because you're human. Before I started speaking about myself in a really honest way, I think people just thought I was this like abhuman person that felt so like unconnected to them. I was just this model that looked really pretty. I felt so like unhuman, and like actually I was riddled with so many flaws. But that's like the beauty of being human. There is nobody on this planet who does not have a lot of weaknesses. And that's what the beauty of self-awareness is.
What a great place to end.
Love that.
Sarah Ann, thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
You really do articulate where you are and who you are really, really well.
Thank you.
And I'm grateful for you giving up your time. Thank you.
I'm glad I called you 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. I can't believe this is only 3 weeks ago. How have I processed this?
I know. Feel slightly guilty. That's been awesome. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.